The sensor array flickered with data that made no tactical sense. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and subscribe for more HFY stories. Commander Vector of the Crethean Imperial Fleet stood before the holographic display, his four eyes narrowing at the scattered formation of human vessels drifting through the disputed zone. Behind him, the bridge of the Sovereign's Wrath hummed with the practiced efficiency of a military force that had dominated this sector for 3 centuries. Officers moved between stations with programmed precision, their movements as predictable as the tactical doctrine that governed every decision they made. "Analysis," Vector commanded, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who had never lost an engagement. Senior Tactical Officer Renzik approached, his scales shifting to a neutral gray, the color of confidence tinged with mild confusion. "Commander, the human fleet consists of 17 vessels. Mixed composition, 6 destroyers, 8 frigates, 3 cruisers. They've been conducting exercises for the past 42 hours. Exercises." Vector let the word hang in the air like an insult. "Show me." The hologram expanded, tracking lines appearing as the human ships moved through 3-dimensional space. Vector watched for exactly 30 seconds before releasing a clicking sound of derision that echoed through the bridge. Several officers turned to witness their commander's judgment. "This is what the Galactic Councils fear?" Vector gestured at the display with one clawed hand. "Look at this formation. No coherent pattern, no mathematical efficiency. They waste fuel on unnecessary maneuvers, break formation for no strategic purpose, and their command structure appears to shift every few hours." He leaned closer to the display, his breath fogging the holographic projection. "They fight like animals responding to instinct rather than intellect." Renzik shifted his weight, an unconscious tell that Vector had learned to read decades ago. Uncertainty. "Something troubles you, tactical officer? Permission to speak candidly, Commander?" "Granted. The humans have been conducting these exercises for nearly 2 standard cycles. They show no sign of fatigue, no degradation in coordination, despite the apparent chaos. And," Renzik hesitated, "they've remained precisely within the neutral zone. Not a single vessel has crossed into disputed territory, while despite having multiple opportunities to claim tactical advantage." Vector's scales darkened to deep crimson, the color of irritation. "You mistake incompetence for strategy. They remain in the neutral zone because they lack the courage to venture beyond it. They maintain coordination despite chaos because their technology compensates for their tactical deficiency." He turned away from the display, addressing the bridge at large. "The Crethean Empire has perfected military doctrine over millennia. We have reduced warfare to a science, every maneuver calculated for maximum efficiency, every formation optimized through quantum analysis. These humans stumble through space like newly hatched younglings, and you suggest we should be concerned?" Silence answered him. "Good. Discipline required clarity, and clarity required conviction." Communications Officer Dralisk, Vector continued, settling into his command throne. "What is our intelligence assessment of a human military capability?" The communications officer's console chimed as she accessed the classified files. "Human civilization achieved interstellar travel approximately 200 standard years ago. Their military structure is decentralized, with multiple command authorities often operating independently. Tactical doctrine appears to vary by region, suggesting lack of unified strategic vision. Technology assessment places them at Tier 4, advanced kinetic weapons, primitive energy shielding, computational systems significantly below Crethean standards. "Tier 4, Vector repeated, letting his amusement color the words. "We are Tier 2 with aspirations to Tier 1 within the decade. And yet the Galactic Council treats these newcomers as potential threats rather than subjects requiring guidance." "There have been Incidents, Commander. Dralisk's voice carried careful neutrality. The Veskari Confederation engaged a human research vessel in the Kepler expanse. The Veskari cruiser was disabled with minimal damage to the human ship. The Zorathian Collective attempted to blockade a human colony world. Their fleet withdrew after 3 days, citing unforeseen tactical complications. And the anomalies, Vector interrupted. Outliers that prove nothing except that the galaxy is vast and chance favors even the primitive occasionally. He stood, his full height impressive even among his own kind, and approached the holographic display once more. But perhaps these humans require a lesson in proper military conduct. Oh, perhaps they need to understand that their chaotic flailing is no match for true discipline. The bridge fell silent. Every officer understood what came next. Renzik's scales flickered through 3 colors before settling on amber. Cautious respect. Commander, engaging in the neutral zone would violate the treaty of... I have no intention of violating any treaty, tactical officer. But if these humans were to accidentally drift into disputed territory, if their chaotic maneuvers were to bring them across the boundary, then the Krethian Empire would be well within its rights to defend its sovereign space. Vector smiled, his teeth catching the blue light of the hologram. Adjust our formation. Standard patrol configuration Delta 7. Move us closer to the boundary. The Shiwushi. Let's see if these humans recognize a superior force when they encounter one. Yes, Commander. Renzik input the commands, and the Sovereign's wrath began to move, its escort fleet falling into perfect geometric formation around it. 12 vessels, each positioned according to doctrine that had been refined through 10,000 simulated battles and 300 real ones. Not a single wasted movement. Not a single inefficient angle. Perfect. Vector watched the human ships on the display, still moving in their inscrutable patterns. Random, wasteful, emotional. They would learn. The sensor array flickered again, and Vector frowned. A momentary glitch, nothing more. The display stabilized, showing the human fleet exactly where it had been 30 seconds before. Exactly where doctrine predicted it would be. His frown deepened. But he dismissed the thought. Sometimes even chaos followed predictable patterns. He had no idea how right he was, or how wrong. The first sign of trouble came disguised as validation. Commander, the human fleet is adjusting position, Renzik announced, his scales shifting to satisfied green. They're moving away from our approach vector. Defensive posture, exactly as doctrine predicted for a Tier 4 civilization encountering superior force. Vector leaned back in his command throne, vindication warming his chest. Of course they are. Continue forward. Maintain formation Delta 7. Let's encourage their retreat. The Sovereign's wrath and its escort fleet advanced in perfect unison, a geometric masterpiece of coordinated military power. Each vessel maintained precise distance from its neighbors, creating overlapping fields of fire that could annihilate any threat foolish enough to engage. 3 centuries of tactical evolution, encoded in movements so refined they bordered on art. Across the view screen, the human vessels scattered like startled prey. Chaotic dispersal, Vector observed, unable to keep the contempt from his voice. No coordination, no unified response. They simply flee in all directions. He gestured at the display. This is what the galaxy fears. This is what made the Veskari withdraw. But Renzik wasn't watching the retreating human ships. His attention had fixed on his tactical console, his scales flickering through confused patterns of yellow and gray. Commander, the dispersal pattern. It's mathematically irregular, but the timing is synchronized to the microsecond. A coincidence, or perhaps their automated systems compensate for their tactical deficiency. Vector waved dismissively. Open a communication channel. Let's inform these humans of proper military protocol. Dralisk's fingers moved across her console. "Channel open, Commander. Broadcasting on all standard frequencies." Vekthor stood, drawing himself to full height, his image now transmitting across the void to the scattered human fleet. "Attention, human vessels. This is Commander Vekthor of the Krathian Imperial Fleet, commanding the Sovereign's Wrath and Battle Group. You are approaching disputed territory claimed by the Krathian Empire under the Treaty of Galactic Concordance, Section 7, Subsection 12. Alter your course immediately or be considered hostile actors subject to interdiction." Silence answered him. 5 seconds. 10. 15. "Oh, their response time is unacceptable," Vekthor muttered. "Poor communication protocols, another sign of—" "Incoming transmission," Dralisk interrupted, her scales paling to white. "Audio only. Human origin. On speaker." The voice that filled the bridge was male, human, and utterly calm. No stress markers, no elevated pitch, no indication whatsoever that its owner faced a fleet capable of reducing his vessels to debris. "Commander Vekthor, this is Commander James Hayes of the United Earth Fleet, currently conducting authorized military exercises in neutral space as permitted under the Treaty of Galactic Concordance, Section 3, Subsection 8. We acknowledge your position and will maintain our current operations. Hayes out." The channel closed before Vekthor could respond. The bridge fell silent. Somewhere in the background, a monitoring station beeped. "Did that human just—" Junior Officer Kreliath began, then wisely stopped speaking. Vekthor's scales flushed crimson, then deepest purple, the color of insulted authority. "He dismissed me. That primitive dismissed me." His claws scraped against the armrest of his throne. "Tactical Officer, current position of human vessels." Renzik studied his display, confusion deepening. "Commander, this is—" "They've dispersed into what appears to be a completely random pattern. No two vessels are equidistant from each other. No clear command hierarchy. Several ships are moving perpendicular to logical escape vectors. It's as if they're deliberately avoiding efficient positioning." "Because they don't understand efficient positioning," Vekthor snapped. "Advance to position Delta 9. Encirclement formation. Well, if they won't respond to words, we'll demonstrate the consequences of disrespect through action." The Krathian fleet shifted, its geometry morphing into a slowly tightening net. Doctrine dictated the prey would recognize the trap and either surrender or attempt to break through the weakest point, which would, of course, be a calculated deception leading them into concentrated fire. The human ships continued their chaotic drift. "They're not responding to the encirclement," Renzik reported, his voice carrying the first edge of uncertainty that Vekthor had heard in years. "No attempt to identify weak points, no acceleration toward escape vectors. They're just maintaining their irregular pattern." "Perhaps they're too primitive to recognize the trap," suggested Kreliath. Vekthor considered this. It was possible. Tier 4 civilizations often lack the computational power to analyze multi-vector threats in real time. These humans might simply be paralyzed by confusion, their inferior technology unable to process the tactical situation. "Commander," Dralisk's voice cut through his thoughts. "Communication relay from escort vessel Silent Judgment. They report minor interference on long-range sensors. Nothing critical, but noted in the log and continue," Vekthor ordered. "Minor interference is irrelevant to current operations." But the sensor officer, Velthas, had stiffened at her station. "Commander, Silent Judgment's report. I'm seeing similar interference here. Intermittent, lasting no more than 0.3 seconds per occurrence, but it's happening across multiple frequencies. Source? Unknown. Could be natural stellar phenomena. Could be the human's primitive technology bleeding radiation across standard frequencies," Vekthor finished. "Another sign of their inadequacy. Adjust filtering protocols and continue monitoring." The fleet tightened its formation. On the display, the human ships had spread across a three-dimensional volume that defied every principle of mutual support and coordinated defense. One frigate hung alone, light minutes from its nearest companion. 3 destroyers had clustered near a debris field, tactically worthless terrain. A cruiser drifted perpendicular to the plane of engagement, its trajectory suggesting it would exit the combat zone entirely within the hour. Madness, or incompetence so profound it mimicked madness. "Commander Hayes," Vector transmitted again, making no effort to hide his irritation. "Your fleet is surrounded. Your position is untenable. Withdraw from this region immediately, or I will be forced to disable your vessels and tow them to Krathian space for violating sovereign territory." Another pause, then that same infuriatingly calm voice. "Commander Vector, we remain in neutral space. Our operations continue as planned. I would advise against any aggressive action." Hayes out. Advise against. As if this human, commanding his scattered rabble, was in any position to advise anything. "Tactical Officer, Power Weapon Systems. Target the nearest human vessel, that isolated frigate. Disable its engines only. Let's remind Commander Hayes of the difference between Tier 4 and Tier 2 capability." Renzik hesitated. "Commander, we're still technically in. That frigate is 0.003 degrees into disputed territory," Vector interrupted. "Verify the coordinates." Renzik checked, and his scales paled. "Confirmed. By an incredibly narrow margin, but confirmed." "Then we are within our rights. Fire." The Sovereign's Wrath's primary cannon charged, a buildup of energy that would have been visible to any ship with proper sensors. The human frigate made no attempt to evade, no emergency acceleration, no desperate maneuvers. The cannon fired. And the human frigate wasn't there anymore. "Target displaced," Renzik reported, his voice climbing an octave. "Moved 0.72 seconds before impact. Emergency acceleration at—" "Commander, those are impossible acceleration figures for a vessel that size." Vector leaned forward. "Oh, where is it now?" 3 light seconds spinward. It's— Renzik's claws danced across his console. "It's returned to almost exactly the same relative position in their formation, as if it always intended to be there. A lucky evasion. They detected our targeting lock and panicked." But even as Vector said it, doubt crept into his voice. That acceleration, that timing. "Commander," Velthas called from her sensor station, scales now flickering rapid fire between amber and white, "I'm registering communication between Silent Judgment and Void Talon. Both escort vessels report. They report losing telemetry data from each other for approximately 2.3 seconds. "Interference?" Vector asked, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying the frigate's movement. "No, Commander. The data was blocked, deliberately jammed, and then released. Silent Judgment never noticed during the event. Only the gap in their logs revealed it post facto." Vector stood, approaching the holographic display. The human ships hung in their chaotic pattern, seemingly oblivious to the danger surrounding them. But now, looking closer, with Velthas's words echoing in his mind, he noticed something. The random pattern had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly, but every human ship was now in a slightly different position relative to his fleet. And each movement had been efficient. No wasted energy, no unnecessary acceleration. The chaotic dispersal had been reconfigured into a different chaotic dispersal, and he couldn't identify the purpose of either. "Renzik," he said slowly, "run a tactical analysis. Assume the human formation is intentional. Assume every ship is exactly where Commander Hayes wants it to be. What vulnerabilities does our current position present?" The tactical officer worked in silence for nearly a minute. Then his scales went completely white, the color of existential fear that Vector had only seen once before during the Cataclysm War. "Commander, if we assume hostile intent, if we assume coordinated action despite the apparent chaos," Renzik's voice dropped to a whisper. "Every vessel in our fleet is currently isolated. The human positions create overlapping blind spots in our sensor coverage. Our formation appears intact, but our individual ships cannot provide mutual support without breaking formation geometry. And breaking formation would expose us to what? Tactical officer? To crossfire from angles we're not monitoring because they appear empty. Commander, I think they're hiding ships. I think the sensor interference is masking additional vessels, and I think—" "Incoming transmission," Drelisk interrupted, her voice shaking. "From Commander Hayes, audio and visual. On screen." The hologram shifted, and for the first time, Vector saw his human counterpart. Commander James Hayes sat in what appeared to be a human bridge, less austere than Krethian design, with stations arranged in a more organic configuration. He was neither young nor old by human standards, his face carrying the weathered calm of someone who had seen combat and learned from it. Dark eyes regarded Vector with something that might have been sympathy. "Commander Vector," Hayes said, his tone conversational and almost gentle. "You've made several tactical decisions in the last 8 minutes. All of them were predicted. All of them were accommodated. You're currently operating under the assumption that you're herding prey. I need you to understand, you're not." Vector felt his scales ripple through confusion patterns. "Commander Hayes, your position remains untenable. You are outgunned, outmaneuvered, and—" "Check your fleet communication network," Hayes interrupted, still calm. "Specifically, check the timestamps on your telemetry data." Vector gestured sharply at Velthus, who frantically began reviewing logs. Her scales went from white to transparent, a color Vector had never actually seen on a living Krethian. "Commander," she whispered, "according to the logs." "Well, we lost real-time communication with our escort fleet 47 minutes ago." The bridge fell absolutely silent. "That's impossible," Vector said, but his voice carried no conviction. "Your vessels have been operating on delayed data," Hayes continued. "They've been receiving what appears to be real-time telemetry, but it's actually a sophisticated feed compiled from your own communication protocols. Your fleet thinks it's in formation Delta 7 advancing to Delta 9. In reality," Hayes gestured off-screen, and his own tactical display appeared beside his face. "In reality, you've been drifting apart for the last 47 minutes. Each vessel sees itself as part of the formation, but none of you have been tracking each other's actual positions." On Hayes's display, the Krethian fleet hung in space. But the perfect geometry was gone. The vessels were scattered, separated by distances that made mutual support impossible. Vector's command throne suddenly felt very cold. "You mocked our tactics," Hayes said softly. "You called them chaotic, inefficient, emotional. But, Commander, we weren't showing you our tactics. We were showing you what you expected to see. Your doctrine is excellent. Truly, it's mathematically beautiful. It's also completely predictable. Every move you've made tonight was calculated 6 months ago during simulations. Every response was anticipated. You've been in checkmate since the moment you decided to advance." Vector's claws scraped against the metal armrest. "What do you want? Currently? Or for you to withdraw from this region and reconsider your assumptions about human military capability?" Hayes leaned forward slightly. "But, Commander, I want you to understand something. We didn't do this to humiliate you. We did this to teach you. The galaxy is vast, and humanity is new to it. There are species who won't be as patient as we've been today. Species who won't give you the opportunity to surrender with honor." "Surrender?" The word tasted like ash. "We haven't been defeated. We've been—" "You've been isolated, disrupted, and placed at our mercy," Hayes said, his calm finally cracking just enough to reveal steel underneath. "Your fleet cannot coordinate. Your sensors are feeding you information we want you to see. And your weapon systems—" He paused. "Commander? Oh, check your weapon systems." Renzig's hands flew across his console. Then he made a sound no Krithian tactical officer should ever make, a whimper of pure terror. "Offline," he whispered. "All weapons offline. Safety locks engaged remotely. Commander, they've been offline for 47 minutes. Vector closed all four eyes. When he opened them again, Commander Hayes was still watching him with that same patient expression. "The choice is yours," Hayes said quietly. "Withdraw with honor or remain, and learn exactly how outmatched you truly are." The communication ended. Vector sat in silence, hearing only the ambient hum of his bridge and the rapid breathing of his crew. 47 minutes. They'd lost contact 47 minutes ago and never noticed. The worst part wasn't the revelation. The worst part was the waiting. "Ah, Commander." Renzig's voice had lost all its previous confidence, reduced to the uncertain tone of a junior officer on his first deployment. "Orders?" Vector soared at the holographic display, watching the lies it told him. Perfect formation, perfect geometry, perfect fiction. His fleet hung scattered across space like debris from an explosion, each vessel blind to the others, each captain believing they maintained doctrinal precision. 47 minutes. "Attempt to re-establish direct communication with silent judgment," Vector ordered, his voice mechanical. "Bypass standard protocols. Use emergency frequencies." Dralisk worked her console, then shook her head. "No response, Commander. The channel appears open, but they're not receiving. Or they're receiving and can't respond. Or—" She trailed off, unwilling to voice the third option, that they were responding and the Sovereign's wrath simply wasn't receiving those responses. "Sensors," Vector continued, forcing himself to think through the paralysis. "Velthas, can we verify our own position? Can we trust any of our readings?" The sensor officer's scales had settled into a dull gray, the color of defeated acceptance. "Commander, I don't know. If the humans have been manipulating our data for 47 minutes, then everything we've seen could be suspect. Our position, their positions, the stellar background, all of it. I can verify we're receiving gravitational data from the nearby star, but even that could be—" "Enough." Vector raised one hand. "I understand. We're blind." "Not entirely blind, Woot," came a new voice. Every head turned to the communication station. Dralisk's display had activated again, showing Commander Hayes. But this time, the human wasn't alone. Behind Hayes, visible through what appeared to be transparent sections of his bridge, were displays that made Vector's blood run cold. Real-time tactical readouts, not of human positions, but of Krethian positions. Every vessel in his fleet, shown with precise coordinates, weapon status, shield strength, crew complement. Information that should have been impossible for an enemy to obtain. And in the corner of each display, a timestamp, current. "I apologize for the intrusion," Hayes said, and he actually sounded sincere. "But I think we've reached a point where further misunderstanding could be dangerous. So let me show you what happened. Let me show you what you missed." Hayes gestured, and the holographic display on the Sovereign's Wrath's bridge flickered. Then it changed. The view shifted to 47 minutes earlier, showing the moment the Krethian fleet had begun its advance. But this time the display showed something Vector hadn't seen before. Human vessels that hadn't appeared on sensors. Not scattered frigates and destroyers, but ships that had been there all along, hidden in the sensor shadows created by stellar radiation, debris fields, and electromagnetic interference. 12 human vessels where his sensors had shown empty space. "We arrived in this region 6 days ago," Hayes narrated, his voice carrying the tone of an instructor explaining a training exercise. "Not 17 ships, 29. The first thing we did was map your standard patrol routes, your sensor coverage patterns, your communication protocols. It took approximately 18 hours to compile a complete electronic profile of Krethian military infrastructure in this sector." The display showed the human fleet's true movements over those 6 days. Not chaotic, not random. Every maneuver had been calculated to probe Krethian responses, to test doctrine, to identify the precise tolerances and limitations of their technology. "On day 3, Hayes continued, "we introduced the first communication delays. 0.001 seconds of lag, too small for your systems to flag as anomalous. By day 5, we'd extended that to 0.5 seconds. Your crews adapted, compensating for what they perceived as normal network latency. They never suspected the delays were being artificially induced." Vector watched himself appear on the display. 47 minutes in the past, ordering the advance, watched his fleet move forward in perfect formation. And then watched, truly watched, as the human ships began their real maneuvers. They hadn't scattered chaotically. They'd positioned themselves with mathematical precision, each vessel moving to create specific geometric relationships with the Krethian fleet. Ships Vector had thought were fleeing had actually been establishing crossfire angles. The frigate he'd targeted had been bait, drawing his attention while other vessels locked weapons on his escorts. "When you ordered your fleet into formation Delta 7, Hayes said, his image now standing beside the tactical replay, "our combat AI predicted with 97% certainty that you would advance to Delta 9 within 12 minutes. You ordered the transition in 8 minutes. Close enough." The display showed what happened next, the moment the Krethian fleet's communication network was completely compromised. Not jammed, not blocked, replaced. Each vessel began receiving fabricated telemetry that showed exactly what their crews expected to see, while the humans quietly. "No," Vector whispered, understanding dawning like a sunrise over a dying world. "Yes," Hayes confirmed. "We physically moved your vessels. Not much. 0.003 degrees of trajectory change here. Minor acceleration adjustments there. Nothing dramatic enough to trigger inertial alarms. Your crews felt nothing. Your instruments registered nothing. But over 47 minutes, those micro-adjustments added up. The display showed invisible hands, tractor beams, gravity manipulators, as technologies that Tier 4 civilizations supposedly lacked, gently nudging the Krethian fleet apart. Each ship still believed it maintained formation, their sensors showing their companions in perfect geometric arrangement, while reality painted a very different picture. "Your weapons were disabled remotely 32 minutes ago," Hayes continued. "We accessed your fire control systems through the same back doors we used for communication. Your safety protocols are quite good, actually. It took our AI almost 4 hours to crack them. But crack them, we did." Vector found his voice, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "This is impossible. The technology required to accomplish this, the computational power, the sensor resolution, the electronic warfare capabilities. You're Tier 4. For the first time, Hayes smiled, and not smugly, not cruelly, sadly. "Commander Vector, do you know what the galactic tier system measures? Technological sophistication, energy manipulation, computational capacity. It measures," Hayes corrected gently, "what species choose to reveal about themselves. The tier system is based on observable capabilities, on technology that species openly display. It assumes that civilizations share their full capabilities with the galaxy." He paused. "Humanity doesn't share everything. We learned a long time ago that showing all your cards is how you lose the game. The display shifted again, showing a new image, Earth. Not as Vector had seen it in intelligence briefings, a simple blue world of moderate resources, but as it truly existed. Orbital infrastructure that dwarfed anything the Creathian Empire had constructed. Energy signatures indicating power generation at levels that should have been impossible. And ships, thousands of ships in designs that bore no resemblance to the vessels currently surrounding his fleet. "We let the galaxy see what we want them to see," Hayes said quietly. "Tier 4 technology, decentralized command, chaotic tactics, and species like the Creathians, like the Vescari, like the Zorathians, you see exactly what you expect. Primitives stumbling through space, making lucky guesses, winning through accident rather than design. The Vescari," Vector breathed. "The Zorathians. You did this to them, too. We've done this to everyone who approached us with hostile intent. The Vescari thought they were facing one research vessel. They were actually facing a research vessel, 3 stealth cruisers, and a complete real-time analysis of their entire fleet doctrine. The Zorathians thought they'd successfully blockaded a colony. They were actually being herded into position for a diplomatic demonstration that convinced them withdrawal was preferable to engagement." Hayes leaned forward, his expression intense. "But here's what you need to understand, Commander. We didn't do this to conquer you. We didn't do this to humiliate you. We did this to teach you a lesson that might save your civilization." "And what lesson is that?" Vector asked bitterly. "That doctrine is a prison. That predictability is a weakness. That the moment you assume your enemy is inferior, you've already lost." Hayes's voice sharpened. "Your formations are beautiful. Your mathematics are flawless. Your 300 victories are genuinely impressive. But every single one of those victories was won against enemies who fought the way you expected them to fight. You've never faced an opponent who refused to play by your rules." The display shifted one final time, showing the current situation in its full, terrible clarity. The Creathian fleet hung scattered and vulnerable, surrounded by human vessels that had been invisible minutes ago. But now Vector could see more, the sensor signatures of weapons he hadn't known humanity possessed, the energy readings of shields that shouldn't exist, the quantum signatures of technologies that required computational power far beyond what Tier 4 implied. And the numbers, the cruel, undeniable numbers. 12 Creathian vessels, isolated and blind, facing 29 human ships that could coordinate, communicate, and strike with perfect precision. "Oh, your weapons are offline," Hayes said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Your communications are compromised. Your sensors are feeding you carefully curated data. Your formation is broken. Your fleet is at our mercy." He paused. "And, Commander, we haven't fired a single shot." Vector felt something crack inside him. The foundation of certainty that had supported his entire career, his entire worldview. He had commanded the Sovereign's wrath for 12 years. He had studied doctrine for 20. He had believed, with absolute conviction, that Creathian military superiority was an objective fact, as immutable as physics. That certainty was gone. "What now?" he asked, and hated how defeated he sounded. Hayes's expression softened. "Now you have a choice. You can order your fleet to withdraw. We'll restore your communications. Return control of your systems and allow you to leave with full honors. Your crews will never know how completely you were compromised. Or you can refuse. You can attempt to fight with whatever backup systems you think might still be secure. You can try to call for reinforcements from the nearest Creathian outpost." Hayes's voice remained gentle, but Vector heard the steel underneath. And we'll show you what happens when humanity stops teaching and starts winning. The choice is yours, Commander, but I need an answer in the next 60 seconds. The bridge of the Sovereign's wrath fell silent. 60 seconds to abandon 300 victories. 60 seconds to admit that everything he'd believed about warfare, about superiority, about the natural order of the galaxy was wrong. Betrenzik spoke quietly from the tactical station. Commander, if we withdraw now, we can return with reinforcements. We can study their tactics, adapt our doctrine. They've already studied our doctrine, Vecthor interrupted, his voice hollow. They've already adapted. Don't you understand, tactical officer? We're not in a battle. We're in a lesson. He turned to face Hayes on the display. A lesson? We've already failed. Hayes said nothing, just waited with that patient, almost sympathetic expression. Vecthor looked at his crew, saw the fear in their scales, the defeat in their postures, saw young Kralaith gripping her console with claws that trembled, saw Vel'Thaz staring at sensors she could no longer trust, saw Draloisk's hands hovering over communication controls that might or might not actually be under her command. Had he thought of the crews on his escort vessels, still blind, still believing they maintained formation, still trusting in doctrine that had been turned into a weapon against them? And he thought of Commander Hayes, who had orchestrated this entire demonstration with such precision that the Crethean fleet had been defeated before the first word was spoken. 47 minutes. They'd lost the battle 47 minutes ago and had only just realized it. We withdraw, Vecthor said finally. With full honors, as you offered. Hayes nodded slowly. A wise choice, Commander. Stand by. Restoring your systems now. The holographic display flickered. Then, like a curtain being drawn back, it showed reality. The Crethean fleet scattered across space. The human vessels emerging from sensor shadows like predators stepping into light. And the awful, undeniable truth of how completely they had been outmaneuvered. Dralisk gasped. Communications restored, all channels active. The fleet is... They're requesting orders, Commander. They sound confused. Of course they were confused. From their perspective, nothing had happened. They'd maintained formation, conducted a standard patrol, watched their sensors for threats that never materialized. They had no idea they'd been dismantled without a shot fired. Signal the fleet, Vecthor ordered, his voice steady despite the hollowness in his chest. All vessels withdraw to Sector 7. Maintain current headings until clear of the neutral zone. Yes, Commander. As his fleet began its retreat, Vecthor looked at Commander Hayes one final time. The galaxy will learn of this. Yes, Hayes agreed, they will. And perhaps they'll learn the same lesson you did today. Perhaps they'll understand that humanity didn't come to the stars to conquer. We came to survive. And we learned a long time ago that the best way to survive is to make sure no one wants to test us. The communication ended. The Sovereign's wrath turned away from the neutral zone, its escort fleet falling into formation. Real formation this time, verified through sensors that Vecthor now knew could be trusted only because the humans allowed it. Behind them, the human fleet remained, still scattered in patterns that looked like chaos, but concealed perfect tactical precision. Vecthor had commanded 300 victories. Today, he had learned what defeat truly meant. The journey back to Crethean space took 4 hours. It felt like 4 years. Vecthor sat in his command throne, watching the stars drift past, while his bridge crew worked in near silence. Every few minutes, someone would glance at him, scales flickering with unspoken questions, then return to their duties without comment. They knew something had happened. They'd felt the wrongness in their commander's posture, heard the defeat in his voice, but they didn't know. Not really. Only the bridge officers understood the full scope of what had occurred. The rest of the crew on the Sovereign's Wrath and all personnel on the escort vessels believed they'd conducted a routine patrol, encountered human vessels exercising in neutral space, and withdrawn according to diplomatic protocol. Standard procedure, nothing remarkable. Vekthor envied them. "Commander," Renzik said quietly, breaking the silence, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command. Admiral Thekrin requests immediate debriefing upon our arrival." Of course he did. The moment the Sovereign's Wrath had entered communication range with the Krethian homeworld, automated systems would have transmitted standard patrol reports. And those reports would have shown what? Vekthor wasn't even certain anymore. Had the humans manipulated those as well? Had they crafted a narrative that made the withdrawal seem routine? Or had they allowed the truth to flow unfiltered, knowing it would spread through the Krethian military like a virus? "Acknowledge the Admiral's request," Vekthor replied. "Inform him I'll be available for debriefing immediately upon docking." Dralisk relayed the message, then hesitated. "Commander, what do I tell them? What do I include in my official report?" Every officer on the bridge turned to look at him, waiting, hoping he would somehow make sense of the senseless, provide a framework that would let them process what they'd experienced. Vekthor closed all four eyes, considering his options. He could lie. Craft a story where the withdrawal was tactical, where the humans had been aggressive, and the Krethians had maintained diplomatic superiority by refusing to engage. Preserve the fleet's reputation, maintain the illusion of Krethian dominance. But the sensor logs existed. The communication records existed. And somewhere in the bowels of fleet intelligence, analysts would already be dissecting every microsecond of the encounter, discovering the 47-minute gap, the compromised systems, the complete and total tactical failure. The truth would emerge. It always did. "Tell them everything," Vekthor said finally, opening his eyes. "Every detail, every manipulation, every moment we believed ourselves to be in control while the humans orchestrated our defeat. Tell them we were outmaneuvered by an enemy we dismissed as primitive." He paused, his scales darkening. "Tell them we were fools." Renzik's claws scraped against his console. "Commander, that report will destroy your career. The Admiralty will learn from my failure, or they will repeat it." Vekthor stood, his full height impressive even in defeat. "Tactical officer, how many border fleets does the Krethian Empire maintain?" 47 active battle groups, Commander." "And how many of those battle groups use variations of the same doctrine we employed today?" Renzik's scales paled. "Oh, all of them, Commander. Standard doctrine is, it's universal." "Precisely." Vekthor gestured at the viewport, toward the neutral zone they'd left behind, which means the humans could do to any of those fleets exactly what they did to us. They could isolate us, blind us, disarm us, and we would never know until they chose to reveal themselves. He turned to face his bridge crew. "My career is irrelevant. My reputation is irrelevant. What matters is that the Krethian Empire survives long enough to adapt." The bridge fell silent again, but this time the silence carried weight, understanding, acceptance. "There's something else, Commander," Velthas said from her sensor station, her voice hesitant. "I've been reviewing the sensor logs from the encounter, the human vessels we couldn't detect. Their stealth technology isn't just advanced, it's impossible." "Impossible how?" "They weren't hiding in sensor shadows. They were creating them, actively manipulating local space-time to deflect our sensors. That requires energy generation at levels that shouldn't be sustainable, and computational power to coordinate 29 vessels simultaneously." She trailed off, then continued in a whisper. "Commander, the tier system rates civilizations based on observable technology. But what if the humans aren't Tier 4? What if they've been Tier 2 all along, or even Tier 1, and simply chose to appear primitive? Vector had considered this during the long hours of travel. It was the nightmare scenario, the possibility that made his scales itch with paranoia, but he'd reached a different conclusion. "No," he said slowly. "I don't think they're hiding their tier level. I think they're playing a different game entirely. Commander, the tier system measures technology, power generation, computational capacity, material science. But Commander Hayes didn't defeat us with superior technology. He defeated us with superior strategy, with understanding, with psychological warfare so sophisticated that we never realized we were being manipulated." Vector moved to the holographic display, which now showed accurate sensor readings of Krethian space ahead. "The humans have technology we didn't anticipate, yes. But their real advantage is that they think differently than we do. They don't follow doctrine. They don't trust in mathematical certainty. They adapt, improvise, deceive. They fight like animals," Kralith muttered. I then immediately looked horrified at having spoken aloud, but Vector surprised everyone by nodding. "Yes, they do. And perhaps that's why they're so dangerous. We evolved past animalistic warfare millennia ago. We refined combat into a science, eliminating chaos and uncertainty. We became predictable." He gestured at the display. "The humans never eliminated their chaos. They weaponized it." The Sovereign's wrath crossed into Krethian territory, and the weight of home pressed down on all of them. Within hours, the encounter would be analyzed by every military mind in the Empire. Within days, it would reach the Emperor himself. Within weeks. "Communications intercept," Dralisk announced suddenly, her scales flashing alarm colors. "Multiple sources, priority channels. It's spreading, Commander." "What is?" "Our encounter. The Zorathian Collective is broadcasting an intelligence briefing about human capabilities. The Veskari Confederation just issued an advisory warning all vessels to avoid engaging human ships without overwhelming force." "And?" She paused, reading her display with disbelief. "The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. Topic: Reassessment of human civilization status." Vector felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. "They're all reporting similar encounters, aren't they?" "Yes, Commander. The Zorathian report describes tactical manipulation and communication compromise identical to what we experienced. The Veskari are claiming their cruiser was disabled by weapons that shouldn't exist. There are 6 other species reporting anomalies, defeats that shouldn't have been possible, such as withdrawals that made sense at the time but seem suspicious in retrospect." The scope of it crystallized in Vector's mind. Not one demonstration, not one lesson. A coordinated campaign across multiple species, multiple regions, all designed to send the same message: humanity is not what you think. "They've been doing this for months," Renzik breathed. "Maybe years. Every species that approached them with hostile intent, every fleet that underestimated them, they systematically dismantled, and they did it so precisely that each species thought they were the only ones. Until now," Vector added, "until we all started comparing notes." Commander Hayes's words echoed in his memory. "The galaxy will learn of this. And perhaps they'll learn the same lesson you did today." Not perhaps. Hayes had known exactly what would happen. Alal had orchestrated not just the Sovereign's wrath's defeat, but the revelation that would follow. The moment when multiple species would simultaneously realize they'd been played, manipulated, defeated by an enemy they'd dismissed as insignificant. "It's brilliant," Vector said softly, admiration mixing with his defeat. "They didn't want to conquer us. They wanted to terrify us, to make us question every assumption, every doctrine, every certainty. They wanted to plant seeds of doubt in every military mind in the galaxy." "Have they succeeded?" Velthus asked. Vector looked at his crew, saw the uncertainty in their scales, the way they second-guessed their own instruments, the paranoia that would linger for years. Saw officers who had believed in mathematical certainty now wondering if their sensors could be trusted, if their communications were secure, if the empty space around them was truly empty. Yes, he said quietly, they have. The Sovereign's wrath approached the orbital docks of the Crethian homeworld. Below, on the surface, admirals and intelligence officers were preparing questions. Senators were drafting emergency protocols. The Emperor himself would demand answers. And Vector would give them the only answer that mattered. We underestimated them, and we paid the price. Docking in 15 minutes, Renzik reported. 15 minutes until the debriefing. 15 minutes until his career ended. 15 minutes until the Crethian Empire began the long, painful process of adapting to a galaxy where humanity existed not as primitives to be guided, but as apex predators wearing the mask of prey. Vector straightened his uniform, preparing himself for what came next. Behind him, across the void, in the neutral zone they'd fled from, Commander Hayes and his fleet were undoubtedly already moving to their next position, already preparing the next demonstration, already teaching the next lesson to the next species arrogant enough to think humanity could be dismissed. The age of certainty was over. The age of adaptation had begun. And the Crethian Empire, like every other civilization that had tested humanity's patience, would have to learn to survive in a galaxy where the rules had changed. Or they would learn what happened to species that refused to adapt. 3 days later, Vector stood in a room he'd never expected to see. The Chamber of Strategic Assessment occupied the highest level of the Imperial War Complex, and a circular space with walls of transparent steel that offered a panoramic view of the Crethian homeworld below. 12 admirals sat in geometric precision around a central podium where Vector had spent the last 6 hours explaining in excruciating detail exactly how Commander Hayes had dismantled his fleet without firing a single shot. Admiral Thecarin, Supreme Commander of the Crethian Fleet, sat directly across from Vector. His scales had cycled through every color of anger, disbelief, and finally, grudging acceptance during the debriefing. Now they had settled into a muted gray, the color of strategic recalculation. "Let me ensure I understand correctly," Thecarin said, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades of military command. "The humans compromised your communication network, manipulated your sensor data, and remotely disabled your weapon systems, physically repositioned your vessels without your knowledge, and maintained this deception for 47 minutes. And during those 47 minutes, you believed yourself to be in complete control. Yes, Admiral. And when they revealed this manipulation, they offered you honorable withdrawal rather than destruction. Yes, Admiral." Thecarin leaned back, his claws drumming against the armrest of his chair. "Commander Vector, in your professional assessment, could we have detected this manipulation if we'd been more vigilant? If your crew had been more alert, more suspicious, more—" "No, Admiral," Vector's voice was firm. "The humans didn't exploit our negligence. They exploited our doctrine. Every response we made, every decision we considered, while every tactical adaptation we might have attempted, all of it was predicted and accommodated. They didn't defeat Commander Vector and the crew of the Sovereign's Wrath. They defeated 3 centuries of Crethian military evolution." Silence filled the chamber. Several admirals shifted uncomfortably. "The other reports," another admiral said. Vector didn't recognize her, but her insignia indicated special intelligence. The Zorathians, the Veskari, 6 other species, all describing similar encounters, all reporting defeats that seemed impossible. "Commander, do you believe this represents a coordinated human strategy?" "Without question, Admiral." Commander Hayes admitted as much. "They've been conducting these demonstrations for months, perhaps years." each encounter carefully calibrated to teach without conquering, him to terrify without destroying. Vector paused. And now, with all our reports surfacing simultaneously, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable truth, which is that humanity has been operating at a level of strategic sophistication we didn't believe possible, and they've done so while maintaining the appearance of primitive chaos. Vector gestured to the holographic display at the chamber's center, which showed the compiled intelligence from all reported encounters. They've waged psychological warfare across the galaxy, and we never realized we were combatants. Admiral Thekrin stood, approaching the display. The Emperor has requested recommendations, options for how the Krethian Empire should proceed. He looked at Vector. You've spent more time in direct communication with a human military commander than any Krethian officer. What do you recommend? Vector had spent 3 days anticipating this question. 3 days reviewing every word Hayes had spoken, every decision the human commander had made, every mercy he'd chosen to extend rather than exploiting to its fullest. I recommend, Vector said carefully, that we treat humanity not as a Tier 4 civilization, nor as a Tier 2, nor any tier the galactic system recognizes. I recommend we create a new classification, unknown capability, extreme caution. You recommend we admit ignorance, another admiral challenged, that we formally acknowledge we don't understand human military capacity? I recommend we acknowledge the truth, Admiral. Well, because the alternative, continuing to operate under false assumptions, will cost us more than our pride. It will cost us our survival. Thekrin studied him for a long moment. You've changed, Commander. 3 days ago, you were one of our most confident advocates for Krethian military superiority. Now you sound like someone who learned a lesson, Vector finished. Painfully, but definitively. He stepped closer to the display. Admirals, Commander Hayes could have destroyed my fleet. Instead, he educated it. That choice tells us more about human strategic thinking than any intelligence report. They don't want to conquer. They want to deter. They want us so uncertain, so paranoid, or so convinced of our own vulnerability that we never test them again. And you believe we should simply accept this? I believe we should be grateful for it, Vector said quietly, because the alternative, humanity that actually wanted to conquer, would be facing a galaxy completely unprepared to resist. The chamber fell silent. On the holographic display, human ship signatures blinked in the neutral zone, maintaining their positions, conducting their exercises, showing the galaxy exactly what they wanted it to see. Chaotic, inefficient, primitive. Lies wrapped in truth, wrapped in warning. The Emperor will not be pleased, Thekrin said finally, but I will relay your recommendations. Dismissed, Commander. Vector saluted, turned, and walked toward the exit. He'd expected to be stripped of command, possibly imprisoned for dereliction of duty. Instead, they were asking his advice. The galaxy truly had changed. Commander Vector, Thekrin called as he reached the door. One final question. Vector turned back. If you encountered Commander Hayes again, in the same situation, knowing everything you know now, what would you do differently? Vector considered this, played through scenarios in his mind, imagined different approaches, different tactics, different responses to the human fleet's apparent chaos, and realized with absolute certainty that it wouldn't matter. Nothing, Admiral, because any action I took would still be based on doctrine, on predictability, on the assumption that warfare follows mathematical rules. And Commander Hayes would still be 3 moves ahead. He paused at the threshold. The only way to win against humanity is to stop playing their game, to refuse engagement entirely, to recognize that some opponents cannot be defeated, only avoided. He left the chamber, those final words hanging in the air like a prophecy. Vector returned to his quarters aboard the Sovereign's Wrath, now docked in orbital berth 17. The ship had been thoroughly examined by technical specialists, every system scanned for human infiltration, every line of code reviewed for backdoors and manipulations. They'd found 17 separate access points, 17 places where human code had quietly inserted itself into Krathian systems, monitoring, manipulating, controlling, all of them so elegantly designed that even knowing what to look for, the specialists had needed 2 full days to identify them. And these were just the ones they'd found. His personal console chimed. An incoming message flagged as priority diplomatic communication. Vector activated it, expecting another summons from Fleet Command or Intelligence. Instead, Commander James Hayes appeared on the screen. "Commander Vector," Hayes said, his expression neutral, "I hope this message finds you well. I'm aware that our encounter has created certain complications for your career. That wasn't my intention, though I understand it was an inevitable consequence." Vector said nothing, simply stared at the human who had dismantled his worldview in 47 minutes. "I wanted you to know," Hayes continued, "that your actions during our encounter were exemplary. You faced an impossible situation with dignity. You made the choice to preserve your crew rather than preserve your pride. That's the mark of a true commander, regardless of species." He paused. "The Krathian Empire is fortunate to have officers like you, officers capable of learning, adapting, accepting hard truths." "Is this message being sent to all Krathian commanders?" Vector asked. "Or am I special?" Hayes smiled slightly. "You're the only one who asked the right questions. During our communication, you didn't waste time on threats or posturing. You recognized the situation, accepted it, and made a rational decision. That suggests intellectual flexibility." The smile faded. "The galaxy is changing, Commander. Humanity's presence has disrupted established power structures, challenged assumptions that stood for millennia. The species that survive this transition will be the ones capable of adaptation, the ones who can look at chaos and find the patterns, the ones who understand that strength comes not from certainty, but from the willingness to question everything." "Including your own certainty?" Vector challenged. "Or does humanity believe itself infallible?" "We believe ourselves constantly one mistake away from extinction," Hayes replied. And for the first time, Vector heard something raw in the human's voice. Not weakness, vulnerability. "We came to the stars because our homeworld nearly killed us. Wars, climate collapse, resource depletion. We survived because we learned to adapt, to cooperate, to set aside pride in favor of survival. That experience shaped everything about human military doctrine. We don't fight to prove superiority. We fight to ensure no one ever mistakes our desire for peace as inability to wage war." Vector understood then, truly understood. The humans weren't playing a game of dominance. They were playing a game of survival, and they'd become so proficient at it that other species' attempts at dominance looked like childish posturing by comparison. "What happens now?" Vector asked. "Your demonstrations have succeeded. The galaxy fears you. What's the next move?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Now we wait. We give civilizations like yours time to process, adapt, decide how they want to proceed. Some will seek alliance. Some will retreat into isolation. Some—" He trailed off. "Some will decide that humanity represents an existential threat that must be eliminated. And those species will learn why we spent 2 centuries preparing for contact before revealing ourselves to the galaxy. 2 centuries. The implications made Vector's scales ripple with involuntary fear. Humanity had been watching, studying, preparing while the galaxy remained oblivious. How many other secrets did they hold? How many other capabilities remained hidden? "I have a question," Vector said. "Off the record, commander to commander, are you really Tier 4? Hayes's smile returned, enigmatic and unsettling. "What do you think, Commander?" "I think tier classifications were created by species who assumed technological development followed linear progression, who never considered that a civilization might deliberately appear weaker than it actually is. An astute observation. I think," Vector continued, "that humanity has spent 2 centuries building infrastructure the galaxy can't see, developing technologies we can't imagine, and preparing for conflicts we can't predict. I think you've weaponized our own certainty against us. Also astute. But I don't think you're going to tell me the truth." Hayes laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "No, Commander, I'm not, because the uncertainty is the weapon. The moment we reveal our full capabilities, we lose the advantage of unpredictability. Better to let species like yours wonder, worry, second-guess every assumption." His expression grew serious. "But I will tell you this. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We've seen what happens when species chase empire. We just want to be left alone to exist, to explore, to survive. Everything else, all the demonstrations, all the fear, all the uncertainty, it's just insurance." The message ended. Vector sat in his quarters, staring at the blank screen, processing everything Hayes had said and everything he'd carefully avoided saying. Insurance against extinction. Insurance against aggression. Insurance against the galaxy's tendency to test the weak and exploit the vulnerable. Humanity had looked at galactic civilization and decided it needed protection from the very species that claimed to represent order and progress. And they'd spent 2 centuries building that protection in secret. Vector's console chimed again. Another message, this one from Admiral Thecarin. "Commander, the Emperor has accepted your recommendations. New protocols regarding human contact are being implemented across all fleet groups, and you are hereby promoted to Admiral and assigned to the newly created Office of Human Affairs. Your first task, develop counter-doctrine. Find a way for the Krethian Empire to engage with humanity on equal terms. Report to Imperial Command tomorrow at dawn. Promoted, not punished." Because the Empire had finally understood what Vector had learned in 47 minutes. The galaxy had changed, and survival required adaptation. He looked out his viewport at the Krethian homeworld below. Billions of citizens going about their lives, unaware that their assumptions about galactic hierarchy had been shattered. Unaware that humanity, dismissed as primitive, underestimated as weak, had been watching them all along. Vector thought of Commander Hayes, somewhere in the void, conducting his exercises, maintaining his demonstrations, teaching his lessons to any species arrogant enough to need them. And he thought of the question Hayes had left unanswered. "Are you really Tier 4? The answer didn't matter. Whether humanity was Tier 4, Tier 2, or something beyond classification entirely, they'd proven something far more important. They'd mastered the art of making certainty itself a liability. Admiral Vector, the title still felt strange, stood and straightened his uniform. He had work to do, doctrine to rebuild, assumptions to challenge, certainty to replace with strategic flexibility. The Krethian Empire had mocked human tactics and lost more than contact. They'd lost the comfortable illusion of superiority. But perhaps, Vector thought as he prepared for his new role, that loss was the greatest gift humanity could have given them. And because civilizations that refused to adapt didn't survive, And survival, as the humans had proven, required the courage to question everything, even, especially, yourself. What do you think about this clash between alien arrogance and human power? Share your thoughts below. And remember to like and subscribe for more HFY stories.